All right, hi everyone. It's Nicole Wood, Wildlife Bio Gal here with Scicomm Monday. We have another excellent interview coming up here with Mark Hauber. He's the editor-in-chief of the AUK, and you also do a lot of cowbird research. And so can you tell everyone what your handle is in case they want to be able
Sure.
to ask
My
you more
handle
questions
is
afterwards?
at Cowbird Lab, and I'm about to move my lab from New York City to the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana, but cowbirdlab.org is where I live, and Cowbird Lab is what we tweet at.
That's great. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your duties as a editor-in-chief of a major scientific journal. Like, what do you even do? What does editor-in-chief do? Do you just like
Sure.
have a nice little title that you get to like put on your badge as you go around conferences, or?
I get to be on the cover of the journal, so that's the most
Ooh,
important
yeah.
part. But it's been an honor to serve the American Ornithological Society. I grew up in Hungary, and I always wanted to study birds, and here I am helping to produce one of the two publications that we have. The editor-in-chief does fun parts and does, sort of job-like parts. So the fun part is to receive people's papers and evaluate them for, content and the suitability, figure out, what people are doing these days. What are the forefront issues in ornithology. So the ALK works on basic ornithology, anything that's relevant to basic biology, focusing on birds. And then the Condor, our sister journal, is the Conservation and Applied Sciences Management Journal. So I decide on whether a paper goes out for peer review based on how it fits with the journal and what, sort of the scope, sample size, statistics, all that. And then we have an army of associate editors and two full editors who help me decide on what the fate of those journal articles will be. Are they accepted? Are they rejected? Are they invited for revision? And then there's parts of the job which, we have two employees, we have committee meetings, we have a budget, we have to make decisions about, who goes on the back issue or the back page of the journal.
Mm-hmm.
But again, one of the fun parts of the job, like issues, is what bird we put on the cover of the journal. That's really exciting.
Right. Well, we had a quick question, and we'll go ahead and answer it because we want to be able to have all the engagement.
Sure.
But, who created the scientific method? Do you remember? Because it's been a long time since I had that basic thing. It's kind of like one of those. Once you get further onto your career, it's like, are you smarter than a fifth grader? It's like one of those simple, basic things.
My advisor used to talk about Popper's methods, and so I don't know in person. I follow the approach of the scientific method, but it's also evolved. We don't just test one hypothesis.
Right,
we want to test multiple hypotheses. If you learn one thing about biology, is that the random expectation should not be the null hypothesis.
Right.
That's not that's not how biology works. Mm-hmm. Nothing in biology is the result of a random process. And so, whether that's mutation, whether it's bird behavior, whether it's song, you should test multiple alternative hypotheses. And that's the framework that my own advisor, Paul Sherman, has instilled in me, and I've been trying to follow.
Yeah, I would say the same. My advisor, he taught the multivariate statistics class for grad school, so he was, very big into that. And so, it definitely is, kind of evolving past that, just that one big, that one simple hypothesis can be very valuable in, some studies. It also definitely does, help to expand it so you can get more robust study, I think is...
Absolutely. And just thinking through those alternatives will make for a better experiment, will make for probably a leaner experiment in some ways, and will make for more powerful conclusions. One thing that I try to do is I publish lots of negative results.
That's
myself.
something that we're always afraid of. We hear as you go into grad school, you don't want these negative results because it's never going to show up in a journal. But I think that's still important. That's knowledge.
What you need to do is design an experiment where you show that you're methodologically capable of detecting biological significance, but the experiment may or may not be the type of experiment that produces significant results.
Right.
And so, you have to have a positive control rather than sort of just a background level comparison. And so, again, thinking about the alternatives helps. And those make for better papers. It's much more exciting to address 5 current hypotheses for the evolution of wing bar morphology, then address one hypothesis and say, well, what we found is things are different from the random, processes.
Well, speaking of exciting papers, what papers do get you excited when they come across your desk?
So I'm a behavior ecologist, and I study cowbirds. So some people said we should just rename the journal the Cowbird, and so I'm actively, making sure that I avoid that impression. Obviously, anything that's about brood parasites is personally very meaningful to me. But we have a process in place where I've published with a lot of brood parasite researchers, and so I cannot be the editor-in-chief evaluating their work. So often when my friends publish or send papers to the journal, I ask the editors to handle those, so that
makes sense. It's no bias.
There's we have a conflict of interest policy, and I have to follow that very clearly. But I think I always thought of the ARC as a journal which publishes major cornerstone advances in ornithology. And when we changed the title to the ARC Ornithological Advances, that became, codified. So anything that, is relevant for a conceptual advance in ornithology is something I get excited about, whether it's ecology, evolution, information about a new species, information about a new family of birds, discovering new species, reclassifying things, finding new physiological correlates of behavior. We are a fully integrative journal. Any method is welcome, and any species is welcome.
Yeah, so just, things that maybe you might not have known about, so you get to learn something new is
Absolutely.
always exciting.
It's the most honoring part of being, at the job, to look at things. We've got an editor for paleontological research, we've got an editor for genomic research, immunochemistry, you name it. We can review it and evaluate it carefully.
So, what advice would you give to someone who wants to submit an article to the ARC?
So my advice is to read some recent papers, see what gets published in the ARC, and also think about, have you read one of your favorite papers in the ARC? Does your paper match the level of quality, the level of breadth, the scope? And then, remember you're writing for an informed audience. Our referees are mostly ornithologists, so you don't have to include the entire introductory chapter of your thesis. What you want to do is provide a brief but, informed introduction about your topic and focus on the concepts. We know how to misnet, but we don't know how to run multi-model, Poisson regressions necessarily. So describe the things that are not necessarily standard in the field in detail, so that the referees can evaluate it. And the most important thing about a paper is that you should ask interesting questions. You should answer them with relevant statistics, and then you should comment on them in the context of the broader literature. Make sure your abstract matches what you cover. Don't make the abstract too flowery. If the results, don't back it up. Write for a focused audience. I think that's the best advice I can give.
So that was going to be my next question: is what sort of pet peeves do you have, and is that one of the things? Is having that big flowery thing?
Yeah. Oh. So I think the most important part is the abstract. People often are only going to read your abstract, and you want to capture their interest, but also be truthful. The most important thing a paper is it has to be honest. You have to tell us what you did. You have to tell us what your limitations were, what your constraints and what your advances were, and the abstract has to reflect all of that.
So, what kind of misconceptions about publishing do you think that there is?
So one thing is, think about every member of the publishing enterprise as a human being. So publishing, just like scientific evaluation, is a very subjective process.
Right.
We want to be as subjective as possible, but we are human beings, and I work in a psychology department right now, and people are just not objective. It's never going to happen. So what you want to do is capture the interest and write in a clear way that allow us to understand what you've done. I get really upset about papers that have no data points because everybody's talking about the statistical models. If you don't tell me what the bird actually did or how big it is, I cannot evaluate the paper. So I remember having reviewed a condor paper some time ago, and it was a really long-term study on seabirds or what it was, but there were no data points. I could not tell how different the males and the females were in this particular species. So give us specifics, give us the appropriate statistical analyses, and make sure that your results address your hypotheses. Don't tell us I went and measured everything I could possibly do about these birds. There are specific questions you're asking at the end of the introduction. Your methods should describe how you answer those questions, and then the results should be the answers to those questions. And that makes for an easily interpretable paper.
Yeah, those are all good points. And branching off from maybe the science, audience misconceptions about publishing, what do you think the non-science audience misconceptions are when it comes to publishing in journals? What the peer review process? Do you think they really truly understand what that means when it's a peer review?
I think the informed, audience. I think governmental folk understand the value of peer review. It's basically being evaluated by strangers to your studies, to yourself. You want to be evaluated by people who are not involved in your research to see whether you stand up to the rigors of the scientific process and honest truthful reporting. I think we have to educate the public more. I think people like to read the Ark and the Condor because they are about the birds that they are interested about. They take our advice, management implications, biological conclusions to their heart, and people turn to our journals to learn more about birds. But we also do a lot of outreach efforts. We tweet about our papers, we do press releases. We like to see science journalists pick up articles in the Ark and write about them in the New York Times and the NPR and Discover magazine and Audubon magazine.
I mean, since obviously we're doing science communication through social media right now, just via this broadcast.
Sure.
Do you think that social media has really helped boost your reach?
Absolutely. We have 5,000 followers on Twitter. Okay. The Condor is nearly at 5,000. We asked the American Ornithology Twitter account to retweet many of our articles. That reaches 8,000 people. If our articles are seen and some of our conclusions are perceived and comprehended by any of the audience, we're excited. And then every now and then, the journalists pick up on the articles, and the next thing you know is you're talking to a New York Times journalist or you're interviewing on NPR. That kind of coverage is invaluable, to say the least.
I mean, I know I've had that happen personally with reporters that they see me on social media. Next thing I'm getting a DM from them saying, "Hey, can we talk to you?" And it's like
your knowledge is translated immediately.
It's a really easy way for them to peruse through what's happening.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's a major service, and I have done it myself. I ask my students to do it. You're using taxpayers' money for a lot of these things, and even when you don't, it benefits the birds for people to know about them, and that's our most important goal.
Well, speaking of, doing social media, that you're encouraging your students and you do it yourself, let's talk about some of your Cowbird stuff, because you actually have the handle Cowbird the name is
sure,
right in
sure.
there. So can you tell everyone again what your personal handle is?
Sure, it's at Cowbird Lab, and we actually work just as much on non-cowbirds as cowbirds, but we work on the context of brood parasitism. So brood parasites are birds that lay their eggs in other birds' nests, cowbirds, European cuckoos, honey guides, white-doves, the blackheaded duck. There's 7 independent origins of brood parasitism, and
I didn't even know that. So
there you go.
I always just hear about the cowbird mostly because that's the big thing
that's
around
the North
here.
American
Right,
brood parasites. The Europeans, will talk about cuckoos, and it's a North American movie when somebody talks about the cuckoo's nest, because the cuckoo doesn't have a nest in Europe. And so we talk a lot about that. The roadrunner is a cuckoo, right? So cuckoos are interesting because some of them are parasitic and some of them are not parasitic. And so we try to understand, how they're able to sneak their eggs into other birds' nests, why the hosts don't recognize the cuckoos and the cowbirds. And also we ask the questions about how cowbirds and other brood parasites know who they are. How do you know that you're not a sparrow or a warbler when you're fostered by them? How does your individual identity develop in the first place?
Yeah, I just recently at my home we actually had a cowbird lay egg in a Phoebe nest. And the Phoebe kicked it out because we found it on the ground below the nest, because at first we were like, wait, what is this? And then we looked up and I was like, that's not a Phoebe egg. What is this? I was like, this is a cowbird egg. This has to be a cowbird egg.
So
and I tweeted it out to get confirmation from everyone, which really helps.
That's what it was. I would say actually it was probably another cowbird kicking it out.
Really? I didn't know they would do that. How often does that happen?
There's multiple parasitism, and cowbirds, will replace a host egg against their own. I've never known a Phoebe to reject an egg.
Oh, okay.
So I think it was probably somebody else. But it would have been, did you guys ever peek into the nest and see if there was another cowbird egg in there?
No, it was just the 4 Phoebe eggs, and they hatched. Unfortunately, the nest was destroyed, I'm assuming, by a raccoon that had crawled up the deck. So it was disappointing because I had been cataloging them and putting them up on social media for everyone to see, and it's like, it was just gone. But I mean, it was also good for everyone to be able to see that does happen. That's part of nature.
Absolutely. So that I mean, I don't know. It could be a new race of Phoebes coming out, and a mutant Phoebe race rejecting cowbird eggs. We're waiting for it. Cowbirds have only recently spread into the Northeast and started parasitizing Phoebes. And so we consider them naive hosts with no egg rejection, but it doesn't mean they can't recognize the adult cowbird as a potential threat, and it doesn't mean that at one point soon a mutant Phoebe will start rejecting cowbird eggs.
I just had one really awesome Phoebe there.
You could have, but it's going to be benefiting. When there's a cowbird egg in the nest, there's only chance for one Phoebe chick to survive, and
that
so
makes sense,
that's an
because
80% reduction.
A cowbird is going to be bigger than a Phoebe, so the amount of effort that the adults have to do.
And it hatches 5 days earlier too, so it has a size advantage, an age advantage. The Phoebes need to develop new strategies and evolve a brand new tactic.
So how do you measure to see who's rejecting what? Do you put in nest cams to be able to monitor that?
So this year we had 3D printed eggs that were painted different colors, and then we put nest cams on. But in most cases you can assume that if you just put a 3D printed egg or a fake cowbird egg of any type, or even a natural cowbird egg, the host will come. But you want to confirm it every now and then, so we do nest cams. We've actually had iPhones, just positioned over. Then last year in Ithaca, it was great because we were able to use somebody's home camera system to monitor the egg rejection. So these people have already set up a camera on their Phoebe nest, and then or their robin nest. My apologies. And we were able to look at egg rejection that way. So robins are really good at rejecting cowbird eggs.
Really?
Yeah, they are.
Which ones are really good and which one are really
catbirds
bad?
And some vireos, orioles. Yellow warblers will abandon some parasitized nests, but most hosts of cowbirds are actually acceptors. It's a really interesting dichotomy there.
How often does the cowbird fledgling or the hatchling, get to the point where it can actually fledge? Is it like usually pretty successful? Or?
It depends. I think people have made the calculations that if a female cowbird lays, like 10, 12 eggs, she will be lucky to get, 1 to 4 cowbird chicks fledging that summer. We found with the Phoebes are super hosts, because they nest early. The cowbirds like to parasitize Phoebes early, but song sparrows are really good hosts too. They can find food in the rainiest of weather, and the cowbird chick does well in a song sparrow nest until, of course, a grackle or a snake comes and eats the whole clutch. So, cowbirds are loud. And parasitism rates, when they're compounded by risk of predation, they could result in quite low success of the cowbird. We also find that about 50% of cowbird fledglings don't make it within the first week. So they just, they're too loud, and the hawk comes and picks them up. They're just obnoxious too. They also beg from other birds, and they get beaten up. And, it's a tough life to be a brood parasite.
Oh, yeah. I would always assume that they were pretty hardy and would be able to survive. I didn't realize there was so much.
But there's trade-offs, right? You have to beg intensively, but then you get picked up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense now that you hear it, but until you hear it, you just don't necessarily think.
Right. And you have to be out there and monitoring these.
Yes, for sure. So, well, I know we're just about out of time here. So, is there any last minute things that you want to tell everyone about?
Sure. Submit to the AUK if you're a scientist. Read the AUK if you're not a scientist. All our papers are open access after 6 months. So if you go to our website, AmericanOrnithologyPubs.org, you could read all the ornithological science back to 2000, and even before that we have links. So you can read every article in the AUK up to the last 6 months, and half of the articles during the last 6 months, even if you're not a member. So become a member of American Ornithological Society, and then you get free access.
Yeah. And then I know something too, real quick, because I just looking back across my notes, and I realized we forgot something that you wanted to talk about was you said that you're going to be stepping down in the future.
I stepped down in April, and the AUK in its 133-year history has never had a woman editor-in-chief. We have a gender-balanced associate editor list and a gender-balanced editorial list, but we would like, I would like, personally to succeed, to be succeeded by a woman editor-in-chief to represent our society. Like if you walk around the hallways here at the meeting, it's a very diverse and very gender-balanced group, and I think that should be reflected in the leadership of the AUK too.
Yeah, sometimes it's just, having that face that you can recognize and, be able to relate to.
Nominate your colleagues, nominate your role models, nominate yourself. Those are the ways to do it.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, that you're wanting to talk about is you're looking for fundraising to have a best paper
Absolutely,
award.
Yes. So if you know somebody who wants to have an award named after themselves and want to give us $12,000 or $25,000, we are looking for a best paper award in the AUK. Otherwise, if there's a call for donations, give us $5, and we will raise enough money to support a best paper award in the AUK, which we haven't had in our 130-plus year history.
Yeah, it sounds like a great idea to help encourage and showcase
the outstanding science there.
Right. Well, we're gonna sign off because I know Mark has to run, and I'm about to start coughing too. So
all right.
You always do that at the end of the broadcast too. So anyways, if you have any questions after this, if you're watching this on replay, and there goes my voice, you can tell that the hour of sleep is kicking in right now. But you can reach Mark at his handle, which is
at Cowbird Lab.
And then you can also reach me at either Scicomm Monday or at my personal handle of Wildlife BioGow, and I'm going to get off the broadcast here so I can go finish coughing. So I hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and tune in for all the great AOS CSO 17 hashtags fun on Twitter, and we'll see you guys later. I'm going off to cough. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.